Welcome to Playwright, a podcast about creating and sharing new ways to play. My name is Ryan Hamann. You can call me H.
And I'm Ryan Quintal. You can call me Q.
For the 150th time. This is our big 150. It's, I guess, quite a momentous occasion.
It's
going to hedge our bets on the 50s because the year specials were coming up pretty soon after. And, this year, every year it adds a couple more weeks. And so I think this year we're okay to celebrate this and the year without it looking too tacky.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. This is now a true, every year you go, the more separation you get. And I guess if you do 52 50th specials, then you probably wrap all the way around to on your 50th year of podcasting. I don't know if this math works out, by the way. 52nd year of podcasting, you're also doing your 52nd year in business and your 20,000th show or something. I don't know how it works out.
We'll be old men gamers at that point. Right before recording, I kind of caught you in the middle of a very strange live stream that you were doing.
So I didn't know that my voice was inaudible about that, which must have been such a warm reception for anyone coming on the stream.
It was the sound of like wind blowing and the occasional plane kind of faintly going by in the background.
Yeah. So I, like many people during this trying time, during these unprecedented times, I'm so sick of hearing that word, have been going a little stir crazy. And so I went and started doing an Instagram live stream just to see, folks I know, to cheer them up, to kind of say, hey, I miss you. I hope you're safe. I hope you're well. And a couple people tuned in. And I think all in all, it was maybe like 12 people that stopped by the live stream. And then at first it was just me hanging out, having a little tequila on this Cinco de Mayo. That's when this is being recorded for you listeners. Today I went all out. I shaved my beard. I've got this weird mustache look right now. It's very strange. And so it was supposed to be this fun, funny thing. And then I was like, you know what? Just sitting there playing Pictionary in real time would probably be fun to do on Twitch. I don't have any Twitch followers. I've got no audience there. So I know I was going to basically be doing it like a clown in front of no one. So I started streaming and then I saw one viewer and then I was like, oh, okay, here we go. And I, started drawing the thing and giving myself 15 seconds or whatever and showing it. And it was a catfish. And what did you call it?
It was a whale torpedo.
Yeah, it did kind of look like a whale torpedo. But then you had the decency of telling me that I was completely inaudible in chat, which was super embarrassing. So I think after we're done here tonight, you and I might try putting something together with my webcam and iPad and the Mac and see if I can do a more official live streaming setup. That might be cool.
That's cool. It was just, I don't know, it was like walking into like a modern art museum and you always see something that you just don't understand, but you're like, you know what? Somebody made this. They were very happy with what they did. I'm just going to let them have that moment.
Oh my goodness. Well, I appreciate it. Very
kind
sweet
of like
of you.
Inaudibly muttering to yourself while drawing on an iPad.
I must look like a beautiful mind or something.
Right. Well, let's get to the exact opposite of your earlier stream where people can hear our words but can't see anything that we're doing.
Yeah. So do we have something special planned for 150
we do.
Here?
For 150, we had a request from Mike Esquera, who said, I don't have a game idea, but an idea for maybe a special episode in the vein of the E3 episode you did last year. How about an episode that's all pitches for the next installment in existing franchises? You could give your takes on how you'd add new mechanics or story elements to freshen up well-known IPs like BioShock, Assassin's Creed, or even something like Medal of Honor. My own suggestion, well, I guess we'll save that till the end. He does have a suggestion, and we'll wrap around to that. But we thought, you know what, we've got our 150 coming up. Why not do this special episode now? So instead of doing the regular game pitches and spending 10 minutes ideating on something entirely kind of fresh and new, we're going to be doing a little bit more rapid fire. We've brought a couple of ideas each ourselves for next installments in existing franchises, and then basically we open the floodgates on the community, and we're going to be pretty rapid fire going through what we would add to all of the games that they have sent into us. So I guess with that, do you want to present your ideas first, or would you rather go second?
Here is a sequel that I think should exist. It's to one of my favorite Xbox era games, Jade Empire. And I think we've talked about this game potentially before on the show, but I would love to see Jade Empire redone. That was a BioWare game that used kind of martial arts as almost like a Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon sort of style game where you have this over-the-top martial arts as the combat system. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to build out kind of an open world, Breath of the Wild potentially style, where you're going around and there's all these different sub-kingdoms you could go to, and you are rallying, you're going to these different sub-kingdoms, doing quests. You get way more cool character action sort of combat going on, and you're recruiting more and more people and building up to a sort of massive Dynasty Warriors size spectacle at the end where the entire empire has to go to war against some sort of big bad.
So Jade Empire, I've played the first hour of this game, I think, a long time ago. But it's interesting to see. One of the things that really kind of stood out to me was this very kind of traditionally Asian setting. This is as if you kind of close your eyes and picture, the type of ancient Asia where Kung Fu movies tend to be set, then you'll pretty much get the setting of this game one for one.
Yeah,
for sure. We see this type of setting reflected in games that come out of Japan and China, but we don't see often Western takes on Asian history and mythology and such. I mean, other than just kind of a shared language of game design, inevitably has some allusions to, Japanese mythology and stuff like that. But I was, perhaps there's potential for cultural appropriation or misunderstanding of certain elements, and the kind of Orientalism that plagued a lot of European literature, and it's kind of a nasty point in history there. But perhaps now that kind of the hatchet's buried, that there's not this kind of mysteriousness about that part of the world. There's not this kind of animosity between the people. Like, it would be interesting to see non-Asian cultures tackle an Asian setting in the same way that Japan oftentimes sets their games in American settings, sometimes very accurately and sometimes in ways that are kind of endearingly puzzling.
Yes, you're right. There's a lot of stereotypes in terms of character design in this. There's stereotypes in terms of even the sort of characters that they're painting with. It's, BioWare, who I believe is a Western developer in many ways, kind of putting their own brush and their own spin on that sort of Asian culture. They were the first to do so many different types of things, including like their work with, the rock Jade, that we haven't seen that setting, I feel like, fully built out in a really modern graphical engine. And maybe I'm wrong about that. I think Sekiro is like the closest we came, but Sekiro is very linear, very level based. So to see, just being able to have the feeling of like walking through the countryside, you can now, like, with time and space and like, games today are so unafraid to be like, this is a 200-hour game, even though sometimes it stresses me out. The idea of incorporating things like true practice of your combat or your defensive skills, either with a master or with an apprentice that you could be working with, and, using things like meditation and mental and physical healing to really build out what it feels like to build a set of these sort of fantastic combat skills that I think would feel really cool and feel like you're really developing the physicality and the mental concentration of somebody who maybe believes in or is following, these sorts of practices.
That's one of the things that always kind of interests me about this is perhaps a unfair, painting with very broad brush. But a lot of the kind of East Asian martial arts and stuff like that utilize aspects of balance and self-control and kind of centering yourself. And, we get aspects of that in Sekiro, did a good job of depicting both the life meter and then the stance meter, your kind of balance, which could be equally as deadly when it depletes. So it'd be neat to explore ways in which this kind of inner focus or this sense of balance, the sense of peace and keeping kind of a cool head could be turned into a gameplay system.
It could be that we're about to get a heavy dose of this with Ghosts of Tsushima coming out on PS4,
That's
PS5.
Right. They're also a Western studio. Actually, I think just probably just down the road from where I live now.
There you go. So I think that there's definitely something to, other people have identified that we've been missing both this genre, this tone, and this setting, but, potentially you can zig where that game zags, where you tell an epic story over a number of years of a whole family, or you can kind of change the scope and the scale of it, where I imagine Ghost of Tsushima looks a lot like a sort of dramatic single character action game. You could go a little bit more developmental, thoughtful RPG with this.
Very cool. I think based on the number of games we have to get through today, I think that's a good place to wrap that one up.
Yeah.
Do we want to give these titles? I don't know if that's necessary since...
I don't know. Jade Empire 2. There you go. The Jadening, yeah. The Hunt for Curly's Gold.
All right. The first idea that I'm going to be bringing in today is one of those kind of like shower thoughts, one of these things I keep coming back to, and this is like a far, far flung, not anywhere close to being a reality with our current technology, but every year we kind of see something that gets us a little bit closer, and so it's one of those things I think about anyways, that maybe someday there will be games like this. Anyways, I'm thinking of a sequel to Grand Theft Auto that is made of kind of procedurally generated stories and procedurally generated voice acting as well. Once we get machines that can really emulate human speech and, characters that could be programmed with a sense of, wants and needs and obstructions and goals and this kind of thing that can really lead to interpersonal drama. And basically you're given this kind of big city of people and everybody has their own story. And you are just inhabiting one random character within this city, kind of like a Grand Theft Auto, and going on this adventure with the character. And I don't know how much of it is pre-scripted or how much of it is entirely created on the spot by the computer. But basically, this story's unfolding. It's unique to whoever's playing it, But once the character dies somehow, then you basically switch to somebody else in the city. And the person that you were following before, their story is kind of over. So I want to take this feeling that you get, this attachment that you get to like a Dungeons and Dragons character that you may have built up over multiple years, and inject this kind of sense of consequence back in the Grand Theft Auto, the sense of unpredictability, of really owning a narrative for yourself, and make it kind of the most shareable game out there, to where you can go online, hear people's stories, and know that you'll likely never get the chance to experience them one for one. So everyone has a story. You are a passenger that gets to control one person at a time until they die by natural or not natural causes or otherwise.
I think that's really cool. Are you also, so you're talking about also the character that you control is finite in this world?
Well, it's, in the world of Grand Theft Auto, I'd like it.
Yeah, you're a superhero. You're invincible.
Yeah. So, you could still probably withstand the amount of abuse that you could in a Grand Theft Auto game. But if you do die in a gunfight, or if you get run over by a car or something like that, then your character, you don't get the wasted screen. You get, your black screen, your character's obituary, and then you just move on to a different character. You're not able to resume that story anymore.
What if you also incorporated the idea, because, Grand Theft Auto definitely smooths out the consequences of one's actions. What if you also incorporated the idea of jail time?
Yeah, sure.
And so you could be arrested and potentially if you get up to enough escalation, you sort of become incentivized to de-escalate in some way. And then by de-escalating, you can be arrested instead of just shot down. And then you can actually reclaim that character X amount of days or weeks or God forbid months later. And they're old. I do like the idea of for some reason, prison hyper ages you. And so you just get back an old person version of the character. Or if the person was a teenager, they become a middle-aged person. And now the character's slower, they're worse at a number of things, but they're still your character. There's a chance to kind of train them back up and get them good again.
I was thinking this is perhaps, there are ramifications that I don't really like in this. If the character dying was the only way to switch to a new character. So, I feel like there are certain problems with that. On the one hand, it would be really neat to have that idea of jail time, be a significant threat kind of hanging over your head that if you get arrested, you're going to have to in real world time, navigate a jail, and who knows how long you could be stuck there. You can't just at will switch to another character. You have to really either wait it out or unfortunately try to find some way to commit prison suicide or something like that. This is the kind of messiness of this that I really don't like. But, and then if people roll a character that they're not immediately interested in, then they could jump off a building or something. It's just I don't know. There's certain nastiness in just the way that people would play it that would make it not something that I would actually implement. But, the idea of jail being a real credible threat, or, you take it really incentivizes you to have a fight back and shoot out with the cops and stuff. You're never going to take me alive because
Blaze of Glory.
Why not?
Speaking of encouraging dark behaviors, one mechanic you could have is, it's so funny because the only game I feel in recent memory that does stuff like this is State of Decay.
Yeah.
And so maybe you have a commune or something that you're growing and you can recruit people, get them to join the commune, and that gives you access to all these characters. Maybe Grand Theft Auto style, you can keep 3 in active rotation that you can switch between. And it sort of zooms you all over the map. It'd be really cool. I don't know if GTA does this towards the end, but you join those characters up and then you're switching between them in real time in a mission. That could be cool.
Yeah. You can find ways to spring one of your guys out of jail.
Oh, yeah. If you get pinched, then you have to stage a jail escape. That's cool.
But one of the things that I think would be really interesting is each of these characters have homes. They all live in the city. It would be interesting to, for one character to die, to be kind of thrown into somebody else's life already in progress, and then to just, drive up to this home that you've spent so much time in before and just kind of see, what's happening, maybe the house is being sold because the occupant is dead. Maybe there's an estate sale. Maybe the family that the person left behind are in mourning, and maybe there's characters you can still interact with. And in some ways, you can even carry forward some of the knowledge that you would gain. So if you wanted to pass your progress in a way between characters, then you could open a lockbox in the bank and then bury a key somewhere very specific that you, the player, will remember. Wow. And then you can just guide this new character to that key. But then you always have to kind of keep in mind, how much do I want to keep on my person? How much do I want to put in this lockbox in case I get taken out in a gang fight or something like that? So, just let's have some real consequences, some real kind of life planning, and in a way that'll kind of like put things into a different perspective. I don't think Grand Theft Auto has really had before.
That's cool. I like the lockbox mechanic too, and having it would almost feel Red Dead, right? In this sort of solemn lead up to a final confrontation where you're like, okay, I'm going to put away the most important things, and maybe in order to retain your house, you have to maintain your relationship with your family or your spouse if you have one, right? Like, if you don't have a spouse, you risk your stuff being sold in an estate sale. If you do have a spouse, you have to have a good relationship with them in order to be welcomed back and, have access to all your stuff again, or else you get kicked to the curb and you have to go get a shitty apartment and all that sort of stuff. So, I'm so interested to see if this could be done with the, that's like, I feel like gaming's, golden goose that we're always aiming for, of like this generative storylines where with enough variables, because, humankind, we think, stories are finite in many ways in terms of what you can do with them. So like, surely you could generate that stuff, and it'd be really interesting to see.
Yeah. I mean, I'm curious to see how Watch Dogs 3 is going to manage kind of a similar thing where you can play as like, I don't know if it's any civilian in this world, but there's at least like a very large variety of people that you can recruit into this agency, and then they turn into the playable characters in a way. So maybe, this time next year or later this year, whenever this game ends up coming out, we'll be looking back on this episode and saying, hey, we weren't that far off to begin with.
Just know, Ubisoft, that I am in no mood to stare at cover art of somebody wearing a face mask now, so please execute your box art more tastefully.
Well, the face mask on the Watch Dogs 3 box art is a pig mask, so it's a little bit more eccentric than what we're used to seeing out in the grocery stores of the modern world.
I don't know what you're talking about. I've got my pig mask right here by my side and everything.
Fair enough. Let's wrap that one up and go to your next pitch.
Okay. This next one, to me, I'm surprised it doesn't exist yet, and it is an end game in many ways for me. So I've tentatively called it something like Super Engine Brothers or something like that. But Nintendo has a few great arcade fun style locomotion games in F-Zero, an old Diddy Kong Racing back on the N64, and of course Mario Kart. And I'm just thinking it's time for the Smash Ultimate of kart and arcade racing. Give us F-Zero meets Diddy Kong Racing meets Mario Kart. Give us tons of crazy levels set in all sorts of different types of Nintendo fiction. I know they have dabbled in this in Mario Kart now, especially with DLC and that sort of thing. And give us CCs, and I know they've dabbled in this, that go all the way, crank it all the way up to those F-Zero speeds, and require those F-Zero type vehicles potentially to navigate them. So now you're in land, air, sea. You've got all sorts of different characters and pilots from all sorts of different Nintendo fiction, and you're doing all crazy crossover worlds, and I'm sure you can get all the same people who want to cross over into Super Smash to cross over into a crazy vehicle racer too.
This is a good idea. I feel like it's kind of similar to what Sega did with Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed, actually. Have you played that one?
I haven't, no.
As we're tracking down.
Of course it already is.
The most recent Sega Sonic racing game was Sonic Team Racing, or Team Sonic Racing.
Yeah.
Which kind of stripped everything that I liked out of Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed, which is a very good kart racer, but you can play as a myriad of Sega characters through several Sega game-inspired courses, and they are like surprisingly just extremely faithful to the original concepts of these games. You have Panzer Dragoon and House of the Dead and Outrun and Sonic, of course.
What?
And so, it's really, really interesting. They take all of these very disparate concepts, really pay a lot of love and attention through the course designs, and you are in these transforming vehicles, going between sea, land, and air.
Oh, yeah.
So it's
air. I'm seeing it now. Son of a bee sting. Sega's done it. I see the crazy taxi guy. Is that what I'm looking at there?
There's a good old one.
That's probably it's 2012. Is that the most contemporary inclusion of the poor crazy taxi guy?
Unfortunately,
I think that's cool. So, I should have checked this out, but unbeknownst to me, I was basically just asking for Nintendo this. I think like you could do something where, in the same way that Diddy Kong Racing had that sort of overworld where you would pilot into different challenges, potentially you could do an overworld here. I know Smash has done overworlds before, but you do an overworld where you're actually going, instead of it to the like frost layer and the volcano place and all this stuff, you do it based on the characters and the fictions that you've built out. So you get that kind of feeling of exploring their space very freeform, potentially as a character your own that you're building, or as one of these pre-selected characters, and cruising through these levels. So like this looks pretty comprehensive in many ways. What's different? I guess, how does F-Zero make some of the Sonic racing stuff different? Because I feel like F-Zero is so distinct in its feel.
I mean, the speed is the thing that really kind of changes that the most. I feel like if you are in transforming vehicles, to go between a Mario Kart speed section and an F-Zero speed section, although I mean there have been F-Zero courses in Mario Kart, so maybe it's entirely doable, but it almost feels like you have to choose one or the other. But I could see F-Zero transitioning into like Star Fox and to take that into like a underwater or flying.
Star Fox Zero.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's cool. One of the things that you could incorporate, I know everything, it kind of ends up in this place today, so maybe this is too tired, but you could incorporate the sort of F-Zero concept of vehicle improvement, or being able to swap that sort of stuff. I know Mario Kart dabbles in that now, so I think a little light RPG stacked on top of this could be really fun. And maybe what you're doing is, like, if you use the Sonic All-Stars Racing model, where the kart is suddenly becoming a flying machine, or it's suddenly becoming a scuba diving machine, you can go in and put on parts that are specifically only going to benefit one of those things, right? So you're trying to like potentially pull ahead at different places on these courses.
Or one of the games I wanted to reference in here as well was, speaking of Smash Bros. Like games, the PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, I think it was called, on the PlayStation 3 and Vita, which was Sony's kind of takeoff on the Smash Bros. Formula. I wouldn't say it was entirely successful as a Smash Bros. Type fighting game, but it did have some interesting concepts in that the levels were, kind of grounded in one game franchise, and then they would be invaded by another game franchise. So you would, start playing in a Parappa the Rapper world, and then that would be invaded by, giant mechs from one of the other games, or
you're like a waterfall from Uncharted or something.
So, the Twisted Metal people would roll into the Loco Roco world, or the Tekken people would take over Jak and Daxter, and just all these like, it kind of...
Just as you describe the franchises, I can tell you why the game didn't work. It's so funny to hear that, because like, I feel like gamers now have think of Sony as having a rich history, but at that point, maybe it wasn't as rich as they thought they had built up at that point. I guess, we don't have to spend too much time on this. I could do a second one, but that's kind of all that I was thinking about.
Okay, well, I think that's cool. I think that's a good amount of time. Let's go on to another pitch. This one's coming from me. I was thinking about a new Tony Hawk's Pro Skater game. And as I mentioned on this show and on Sound of Play, I've been playing a lot of fighting games recently, and I want to kind of incorporate some of those aspects into Tony Hawk, because there's a lot of similarities in the goals and the way that you play. It's all about kind of building up bigger and bigger combos. But in Tony Hawk, you always feel like you are losing speed when you rack up the combos, inevitably there'll be something that slows you down and you're just kind of like creeping along with the manual, trying to reach the next rail, or when you hit
right.
And, your balance is becoming, harder and harder to maintain over time. And so you feel like, I don't know, it feels more dangerous, which, is accurate to the sports type of simulation that they want to build. But I was thinking of like, would it be interesting to have kind of an injection of power when the combos start to build up? What can you do to add that flair and spectacle and to, maybe you don't lose the danger of keeping a combo going. Maybe you become more of a glass cannon, but I want to do something that kind of qualitatively changes the gameplay when a combo builds up, rather than just kind of the score going up, which feels kind of unsatisfying. So what can we do? What can we add to Tony Hawk to make the combo system more interesting?
Well, I don't know if any of the skaters who were selling their likenesses would be interested in that, but one of the things I do remember is from Tony Hawk is going and having a pretty, let's call it, awful simulation in terms of getting hurt, right? There were sometimes you would just take a dive and you go, oh my God, I know. I just landed on my teeth, like coming off of that jump or something. So maybe because you're building up speed and power, you could potentially now, like the faster you're going when you wipe out, the more damage you do to a character. And a character that's damaged is almost like it's a bad set of tires on your racing car. It's less effective, or it takes them longer to get going or something like that. So you could bring in the concept of your sort of own physical well-being potentially.
Or maybe it's because we don't want to like disincentivize people from getting those big combos. I guess the high risk, high reward does make that interesting. But if getting combos was the only way to like restore the life of your character, which, becomes more difficult if you take in a couple spills early on, and you could be moving, pretty slowly and with a limp, and you're kind of off balance when you're trying to balance. But then once you kind of break certain thresholds, then you start to get it back,
That's interesting. Yeah. So the combos it's almost like the way that like the current Doom sequels are like violence is the answer to everything. Like combos are the answer to everything. Like you unlock new parts of the levels by getting combos, and like comboing on certain surfaces make things like ramps and stuff appear. Combos can heal your character up, but they can also, I think you generally, correct me if I'm wrong, but you like the idea in the sense of at the very peak of it, at your highest speed and all of that, you also have the I am so scared that I'm going to mess this up feeling.
Yeah, right. Which is kind of similar to fighting games in a way, like I don't know, maybe not. Maybe like as you are building a higher and higher combo, I guess you are taking more and more control of the battlefield. But I do like this idea of like, I want to maintain that fear of losing what you've built.
Yeah, and I think that's intrinsic to Tony Hawk too, right? Like collecting skate, right. Like having to manual all the way over to the E is like, can be pretty stressful.
What if you gain speed or some sort of like special powers or something? Like Tony Hawk 5 kind of dabbled in this and it didn't work out that well. But like, what if there is kind of an injection of speed or additional physics, like the kind of moon physics you would get in the cheat codes in the early games, or different types of maybe special combos that you can only perform a certain point
once you're at different combo thresholds. Yeah, that's cool. I feel like that's very fighting game of there are certain moves and stuff that you can only do after timing it off of a previous move. And so you could get into like building combos that way. And it's way more, it's not just about like, so much of the Tony Hawk combos can often be about, well, just how much time did you get in the air? Like how big of a setup you could do. And so this is air time plus like being able to perform the prerequisite moves in order to take it to the next level. So that's cool. That's a very fighting game.
Right. I think that's enough time in that one. We've got a lot of community requests to get through, so we'll probably do these a little bit quicker as we go. But, we don't have to do like one sentence replies, but it's probably not going to be super thorough just because there are quite a few of them. So let's go through what the community has provided. The first of which is Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 3.
Yes. The community is so smart. They know all. This is so good, right? I mean, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. I mean, Knights of the Old Republic 3 is maybe that exists in the Star Wars Online Knights of the Old Republic. That's from Ashton Herman. And I'm wondering if it would be also cool now that we've built up to this point in the Star Wars cinematic universe to do like Knights of the New Republic and have something that is, you know, rebuilding the Empire in the same way that the Old Republic was kind of the Empire at its, the quote, Old Republic at its peak, not the Empire. Very, you have to be very careful with your wording of Empire in Star Wars.
I mean, there are different time periods I could see this being set in. It would be interesting, like kind of post Rise of Skywalker, to have kind of a fledgling Jedi Order that you got to perhaps see the hints of at the end of The Last Jedi. Kind of get a sense of the Force no longer kind of guided by the like religious texts of the Jedi, as those were, you know, burnt, and you know, we have to kind of move past the old things. The old Jedi Order failed in their responsibilities, and it's up to, you know, the new group of Jedi to really set out and define this order for themselves. So, you know, maybe it's just them being like kind of space police in a way, you know, trying to get the Het cartels under control, and, you know, doing some of the work that like perhaps like bounty hunters would have done previously, but like trying to kind of reestablish the order in the universe after all of these wars have really kind of torn all these planets apart from one another.
Ravage them. I think that's cool. And to, you know, maybe you play the head of the Jedi Council, or the new head, you play the new head of the Jedi or whatever, and you almost get, as part of the RPG, you're not just making choices for you, the character, but you're also making maybe, you know, the sort of modern Mass Effect style choices where it's going to determine what the new Jedi end up becoming in, you know, 2 or 3 games from now. So, you know, in the same way in Mass Effect, you were kind of like amassing recruits in an army, or you were going to decide like who would be fighting with you in the war against the Reapers. You're finding out over the course of a game or 3 if you're building a new type of sort of gray Jedi that is the true reformist. Are you building a new version of the old sanctimonious, you're not allowed to love, you can't have kids Jedi? Or are you building kind of a new Sith? And it's really based on the governance decisions that you make along with the individualistic decisions that you enact.
Cool. I think that's an interesting direction. Let's go on to the next one. This is a very specific direction. The Last of Us 2 Dancing All Night. Of course, a nice mashup with the Persona dancing games. How would we take The Last of Us and turn it into a rhythm game?
Oh, how do we not make this super dark? Although maybe it has to be super dark because of the fictional wrapping we've set it in.
Perhaps there are, you know, a lot of the clickers and such. You have to be very quiet around them. You have to sneak by them. Maybe in a kind of alternate way of approaching the situation, kind of like a quiet place. If you are in a very loud environment, then you can move a little bit more freely. So maybe there are these type of zombies that are so sensitive that the only way to sneak by them is to turn on loud music from like a loudspeaker and then move kind of in rhythm with the music. If you're out of beat with the music, then they'll hear it and they'll come after you.
I like the idea of kind of pre-scripted little sequences where you're kind of the music is blaring and you're also trying to enjoy yourself. Maybe you're very practiced at escaping these situations, so you've got your little personal boombox, turn on your Bluetooth speaker, and then you're kind of oots, 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 dancing in between the clickers, looking like you're doing it with style and really enjoying yourself.
I've never been rhythm stealth games?
I don't know. There's been so many games where like the rhythm, well, I don't know about so many, but there's been plenty of games where like the rhythm is the movement or is tied to movement, that I'm sure that's probably how you'd have to execute the stealth too.
There's one called Beat Sneak Bandit that I'm finding.
Oh, I loved Beat Sneak Bandit on iOS. Yeah, there's lights and stuff in that game, and trap doors that are opening and closing on rhythmic beats, and so you find yourself like every tap is a step, and as your character butts up against a wall, that's, you know, an additional tap like you were taking a step is what turns them around. So I think you could do like a little, you know, sort of left, right, forward, dodging around these sort of enemies, and maybe different enemies have different radiuses in which they can detect you and that sort of stuff.
Okay, I think that's an interesting direction. Let's move on to Deadly Premonition 2. Of course, there is a Deadly Premonition 2 coming, but we can't base anything off of that because we don't know what's going to be in it. So have you played Deadly Premonition, or do you know the story?
I have no idea anything about this game. Tell me.
Okay, so Deadly Premonition was, it's kind of a cult horror game in a way, where you play a very kind of charismatic FBI agent coming into a small town in Washington State. It's very Twin Peaks.
I was going to say, I've heard of this, yes.
To solve a murder, which eventually kind of turns into a kind of a grander conspiracy. It's just it's a very well delivered story. It's as like the game is super janky to play, and it's really just kind of like held together by duct tape and dreams. But it's just kind of undeniably interesting. The story is just so engrossing that,
really?
You know, it's one of those games where throughout the game, I was at various points kind of suspecting almost everybody in the town of being this killer that you're after.
I know it's on Switch. Is it worth me revisiting or visiting, I guess, for the first time? Or is it too janky?
I always say, like, I mean, it was
really
janky at the time it released, but it's
fair.
I would say, like, you know, if you feel like you're into that type of like really kind of difficult to play, but, you know, rewarding if you end up getting it right type of cult game, then like go for it. But I think the easiest way in is there's a wonderful Let's Play by Super Great Friend, who's very thorough, who's very kind of like, he's not obnoxious or anything like a lot of Let's Players were back in the day. He's just very like straightforward, has some funny moments in there as well, but it's just a great way to experience the game. So I always point people towards the Super Great Friend Let's Play if they want to get the Deadly Premonition experience.
Super Great Friend, not Super Best
Friend. Different person.
Got it. So in a sequel, like, is this a new crime? Is this a series of crimes maybe unfolding as you play through it?
That's the thing, is that in the actual sequel that's coming out later this year, there's this one kind of takes place in a New Orleans type of setting. So perhaps, you know, this is kind of a different city, different kind of supernaturally tinged crime that he's investigating. So what would be kind of an interesting, what would you want for like a, you know, Twin Peaks type of mystery romp?
I've definitely been, I think like the modern detective standard is for me set a lot by season 1 and 3 of True Detective, but also more recently, I've been watching along with my wife Killing Eve, which is a really cool show that I didn't think I was going to like. I thought it was going to be a lot more crime procedural because there was a lot of pantsuits on the box art. But no, instead what it is the tale of somebody kind of chasing this assassin / killer all around the globe and trying to they're always kind of one step behind them, but they slowly become sort of obsessed with them. And, you know, they're in season 3 now. I don't want to give too much away except to say that, like, you start to wonder if you yourself have criminal tendencies. So maybe there's some de-evolution of the main character you could have in Deadly Premonition 2.
Yeah. Additionally, I was kind of thinking of like this would actually be a really interesting setting for like a Tiger King type of drama as well. Characters that are that big and flamboyant and stuff would fit in very, very well with the Deadly Premonition cast and crew.
Yeah, especially if you have I think that's cool to think of like a setting that is just that weird and wild. It's so funny because I think Twin Peaks has really not been, there's been other things that have even gone adjacent to it, but it hasn't really been done again meaningfully. And so I think Deadly Premonition 2, maybe you do something where you're chasing somebody, or you're always one step behind. They're a very eccentric type of criminal, and then you find yourself, in order to draw out the criminal, ever increasing your tactics, so you yourself become more and more questionable, to the point where the crime, you wonder if it was just imagined, and you just wanted to do these horrible things. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that's good on that one. Let's try Portal 3.
Yes, Portal 3. First of all, we got to have a purple portal, right?
More colors.
And the purple portal, more colors. Yeah. What does the purple portal do? Maybe it has some sort of like phasing mechanism. Maybe it changes the physical properties of things that pass through it.
Okay. Yeah. I feel like one of those things that perhaps I haven't thought about in a while, but like it was everywhere when Portal was new, was so many people asking questions like, what would happen if you, shot a portal on blank and blank and blank, and all these like fun kind of theorizing. And some of that was even carried forward into the ending of Portal 2, was kind of contingent upon one of the big things that, people speculated about. I won't spoil it if people haven't played the end of Portal 2 yet, but one of those like, what would happen if you shot a portal here? And then it's like, okay, that's how this game resolves. Interesting. But I wonder if there's different kind of things that haven't been done with these portals yet. Setups that people have kind of always wanted to see. Maybe there's more puzzles about trying to like fill up a room with water by shooting a portal in an ocean, and in the room that you're in, maybe there's portals that already exist and you're trying to like find their sister portals as you're kind of popping out all over the world, almost like that scene where Keanu Reeves is running through all the doors in The Matrix Reloaded.
Oh man, what a specific reference that I happened to watch very recently. Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. I like that. That's cool. And I think like because of the size and scope of things now, you could definitely have a portal that is set in multiple sort of places around the world, and you're totally out of the laboratory. You're really going all in on it. The idea of I think you crank up, what Valve does so well to the next level, which is just the physics of it. What happens when you get liquid physics in there? What happens when you start doing like particles, and maybe there's a particle accelerator or something to that you can portal things into and out of and cause like huge explosions and that sort of stuff to navigate around puzzles. I like the idea of something that also can like freeze matter in place. So maybe you launch something out of a portal, it gets stuck in one of these like static fields, and then you get some control over the field to deactivate it and, launch the thing, almost like the sort of original. It wasn't the portal gun. What's the sort of launching gun that you get in Half-Life?
Oh, the gravity gun.
The gravity gun. So maybe you bring the gravity gun into it, and now you've got some additional layers in there.
Yeah, I mean, this could even be brought into VR. To that space might be an interesting way to explore it, although I don't know how much more we would get out of it if it wasn't like if we didn't have like a big space that we could like really move through. But Half-Life.
Let me tell you, without VR, I almost get sick in a Portal game.
Probably a bad idea.
I wonder how extreme we can take it.
I mean, realistically, Portal 3 would probably just be Half-Life 3 with the portal gun kind of implemented into Gordon's equipment library.
Right. Yeah, that'd be wild.
And then utilizing that in combat.
It might come sooner than we think.
Who knows? All right, let's move on. Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross. What can we add to that series? I've played the first probably couple hours of Chrono Trigger a few times, but I've never been all the way through it. So I think this is one that you had the whole story about buying the cartridge, right?
I bought the cartridge. I'm probably 12 or 13 hours into Chrono Trigger. I never played Chrono Cross though. I think like the general concept of an RPG, especially now that like FF7 Remake is out, where you have these vastly different time periods and you're traveling in the same space or in the same world across different time periods and having those different layers applied to it. You could do so much more, both graphically and narratively now than those games were ever capable of. They took them to their max, but ultimately they're pretty, I mean, Chrono Trigger anyway was on the Super Nintendo very simplistic in its implementation of that stuff. But the mystery you could build now, a time-spanning mystery, you could even get into paradoxes and things, and maybe that happens in the Chrono Cross games, but I haven't played Chrono Cross.
That promise that was made for Fable, where you can plant an acorn and then come back later and a tree will be in its place. I would like for there to be these kind of like temporal consequences between the past and the future. You know, you get little bits and pieces of that in Ocarina of Time and similar types of games, but I would just love for something that really utilizes that as a core game mechanic.
And I think that you get some of that probably in Chrono Trigger as well. There's some, but like you said, there's snippets of it. They're tied to specific narrative beats of like, okay, I'm going to do this thing in this time period so I can go and make this change in another time period. And to take it to the extreme of being able to, you know, literally have either systems or economies or things in place where you can take an area from being a completely impoverished place at the beginning of the game to going back in time, doing something that affects its economy, taking someone out potentially, or, you know, unlocking something for those people, making something never happen. You could use it as like talking to NPCs in one time period where they share stories of things that happened in the past or things that are trying to be enacted for the future. And you specifically go to those time periods and change those things. Could be a really interesting way of cascading changes across time periods.
Let's move on to Alan Wake 2. Where do we take the Alan Wake series?
Great, love it. Let's do it. I think we've pitched something similar. Let's, all sorts of lighting physics, and now that there's ray tracing, you could do a lot more with shadows and how you actually defeat and fight enemies.
Yeah, maybe enemies are manifested from the shadows that are cast by your light. And so as you're shining the light around, because that's your primary way of seeing, you're also potentially triggering or generating enemies that will end up coming at you. And if you could try to kind of go through sections that might be difficult to fight in with your light off, or you could try to avoid shining your light at objects that are close by because they'll cast larger shadows, or certain types of almost like combinations of shapes in the environment that might cast like a human-like shadow or a shadow of a particularly dangerous looking monster.
I think now that you have the stuff with control crossing over as well, that you can really get into the realm of like either potentially crazy powers, or in the same way that Wake is kind of convinced that characters from some of his books or villains from some of his books are manifesting in some way. Maybe you can do a journey across Alan Wake's different books, like literally. He's fictionally able to jump between different books that he's written.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like that a lot. Maybe there's a kind of confusion with one of the characters in the books takes on kind of a consciousness of his own, and you have to kind of go between playing as the character and playing Alan, trying to get him to write certain scenarios for the character to experience to get him out of the jams that he's in. Anyways,
I love it.
On to Populous / Black and White.
Yes, that was on my list too. So I'm glad I didn't read the listener submissions. I'll just read you what I have here. Return this thing. I want a black and white. I guess it would be 3 because there was a 2. Yeah. Make it more systems driven. Make it so that you kind of not only are building this town, maybe take away the war aspect of it. Although if some people prefer that, I'm sure you can still do it. And instead make it a little bit more Minecrafty. Have people, your villagers going around exploring, digging up archaeology digs, and as they uncover relics, you can get new god powers.
Okay, so I haven't played that much Black and White or Populous, so it's kind of trying to think about interesting systems that might be in place. We've talked a lot about, I think, over multiple pitches in the past about creating kind of systems of worship and followers in that way.
Yeah, as in Black and White, you can kind of cast miracles, and the miracles come in the form of like casting rain down on crops for your villagers, and that like the villagers that are around that in a very, kind of radius-based simplistic way will believe in you more, and it's like people's belief in you that powers how much power you have. But there wasn't really much in terms of like a skill tree. There was not an ever expanding series of god powers. I think you could do stuff too where as artifacts are uncovered about you, you kind of chose the animal that you felt like represented you in some way. You could potentially do something where as people uncover text, ancient texts and stuff about you, their understanding of you changes, and so the physicality of your sort of large avatar can change too.
Tinkerbell rules in a way, you are what they believe you to be. Okay, cool. Right. Crack that nut. Let's move on to Sim Ant.
I don't know. This is like running an ant colony?
I think so. I guess the way to mix this up would be to kind of take an Earth Defense Force type of lens to it. I know that taking lenses to ants is something that they probably have a lot of sensitivity over, but maybe
apologize to our ant listeners.
Yeah, maybe like creating underground tunnels for giant ants, maybe underneath a city. And you have to kind of like build up an ant army without being detected. You can carve all the little tunnels, but you don't want the ground to collapse. You don't want to leave any traces on the surface of your giant monster ants until you have a big enough army to emerge and then, conquer this city or army base that's nearby or whatever.
I do like the idea of doing things like very modern interpretations of like recon missions or GTA style heists where you organize an ant heist to creep into somebody's house and extract like cubes of sugar from the sugar bowl and have those little side things that bring home big resource bounties for your little colony.
Moving on to Ogre Battle as an MMO. This is one of the tactical RPGs, which I don't know if I've ever seen on an MMO type of plane. I think turn-based is difficult in MMO settings because it kind of is contingent upon like you don't want to wait for potentially minutes or hours at a time while other people around you are taking turns. So how do we crack that nut?
First of all, this is World of Warcraft.
Okay.
I think one of the modern interpretations of it, for better or worse, might be things that we've seen in the mobile space where you're building up your ogre armies, you're assembling teams, and then you're going and sending them out on missions, and the missions take a period of time. And then it's almost not necessarily Clash of Clans style, but you're like going to send them to take over a town, and that's how you get the kind of team for team matchup against who's defending versus who's attacking. You could do all sorts of things where you get like world bonuses for positioning or timing of strike. Maybe certain characters or classes of characters are vulnerable at different times of day. So you're kind of always trying to figure out when to best send out your ogre armies to lead them into battle.
All right, let's try something similar. This is Dragon Force, the game, and not the band. I've never played this game, and I really don't know that much about it. It looks like it's kind of an Advance Wars type of game in which you are kind of commanding these large armies, and there's a lot of screenshots of these kind of great clashes between all these kind of cool sprite-based characters in pretty impressive scale on screen going up against each other.
Yeah, this almost looks weirdly in a way like some combination between the tower defense game in Final Fantasy VII, the tower defense minigame in the original Final Fantasy VII, and then suddenly it launches into almost like a Dynasty Warriors type of thing going on. I've never played Dragon Force either, but yeah, if the general thing is like having a, let's call it a simplified version of Civ, and you do more of a Civ Revolution view where you're able to make these moves and take these armies, but then you also have the Dynasty Warriors tactical battle sim to go and actually take over these cities or defend cities, and you do that by hand. Could be a cool twist on this.
I like it. I think that'll be as far as we get with that one.
These are so tough. Nathan he's coming for us today.
This next one, I really don't know at all, unfortunately, either. This is Battle Clash, which I'm guessing from screenshots looks to be a first-person mech type of battling game from the Super Nintendo.
I'm looking at it now. So it looks like you're not only battling mechs, but you are doing like point damage to different limbs and that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's hard not to imagine they shouldn't have made it Daemon X Machina, and they should have done Battle Clash 2, right? Or something.
Yeah, so we've seen a lot of first-person mech-based games in the modern age, from Mech Assault and Mech Warrior and all these and games in VR as well do this very well, but it's always like kind of roaming around these giant battlefields and doing it more of like a war type scale, whereas this looks to be a very kind of one-on-one type of fight. Maybe it'd be interesting to have almost like an ARMS, like a fighting game in first person where you're controlling all these kind of different robots with these crazy limbs and weapons, and you have different ways of triggering them. Could be fun. One
thing that looks important in some of the video that I'm seeing is the sense of constant momentum. So I think like, I love the VR twist, taking the VR and then, keeping the things like the limb damage stuff, and then also having this feel like it almost has that like anime style background pacing that looks pretty signature to this game.
All right, Twisted Metal.
Okay, we've played this, yeah? I don't see why there's not a new Twisted Metal. It actually is surprising to me that they haven't gone back to this well.
I mean, if anything, like I would really like a sequel to Cell Damage, the kind of cartoony Twisted Metal game that operated on like cartoon logic and cartoon physics from back in the Xbox GameCube period of time. It's because the whole thing is so over the top anyways. Like, why not just go full Bugs Bunny with it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm for that. I do think that like the thing that Twisted Metal had a lot was that sort of like edgelord aesthetic to it. And so like the characters were like the twisted clown, and the I know Rob Zombie was literally a character in there. So there was something that was very WWE about the whole thing, that maybe you go for more of that that Cell Damage sort of vibe, but you have characters that feel straight out of the WWE. And now let me like design my own Twisted Metal character, put them in ridiculous costumes and stuff. And of course you could do so much now with online battles, and the way that stuff was just really pretty nascent when Twisted Metal was kind of reaching the end of its popularity.
Or if you go more realistic, kind of like Wreckfest recently, where you get like realistic damage being done to the different parts of the cars, and that affects how they drive, and the kind of soft body crumpling, and really seeing the damage that you're doing to these cars. I can see that being a lot of fun. And then spending time like really kind of customizing where the armor is on your car and what you're going to do to protect it against the other types of vehicles that are coming around.
I think for popularity and good measure, why don't we also have the whole thing set on like a, Forza, a slice of a Forza Horizon size map, and then do the true battle royale thing where the circle is always closing in and you have to eventually end with a bunch of really badly damaged cars slowly trying to launch whatever weapons they have left at each other.
Okay, on next is Flower.
Oh yeah, this is the
PlayStation 3 game where
right?
you play a flower petal going around kind of waking up different, kind of restoring color to the natural world around you. But this could be cool in an urban setting. The original Flower kind of played with that, but if you were in a more realistic urban setting, kind of floating between windows and almost like going back to Tony Hawk, trying to find those lines of, who has potted plants, who has office plants, and it's a little bit more kind of like free form, but there are like roots, multiple roots, and it's all about trying to kind of explore and find ways to chain together plants through a urban environment to get to a certain point.
Yeah, you could be like beautifying a city and like greening up a city. I like the idea of potentially having some mechanic too, where as you greenify or as you like restore parts of things, you are losing some of your own flower power in a way. And so maybe you could incorporate something like, bees or bee colonies. And if you're able to like make contact with a bee and get that pollen injection or whatever, that sort of restores your flower power and lets you continue to propagate or something like that.
I like it. What about Ultima?
I did not play Ultima.
Yeah, this is another one that I'm not an expert in. I know it's an old school RPG series, but I really don't know what sets it apart or what makes it interesting. So I guess I can just say make Ultima a tennis game. Set in that medieval fantasy setting.
Ultima Tennis. Yeah. It actually sounds like it should
already a Sega game somewhere. Okay, sorry. Echo the Dolphin.
I like this. I mean, now that you have like your Abzus of the world, I think you could actually do a really cool journey style game. Heck, let's get those developers to get on an Echo the Dolphin experience and tell an Echo story the same way that you do with like no dialogue, no nothing. And maybe you even, spoiler alert for Journey here, encounter other dolphins that you're not quite sure, is that AI or is that a fellow player?
And there's that game, what is it, Manhunter, that's coming out this month. The one where you're playing a giant shark trying to eat people swimming in the ocean. I like the sense of momentum that game has. And, that's something that's really hard to kind of emulate, to get that feeling of freedom, like you're not a clumsy fish, you know where you're swimming and where you're going, but at the same time, like trying to maintain that speed and momentum and that kind of unstoppable power of being such a magnificent and strong creature underwater. Okay, let's wrap it up with Alien Soldier. This is another one that I've not played. I own on one of those Sega Genesis collections, but it's kind of like, if I had to describe it, almost like a Cuphead type of game where there are these kind of side-scrolling levels that you kind of shoot and dash your way through, and then they all kind of culminate, they're short levels that all kind of culminate in a big kind of screen-filling boss fight at the end of them, and those are the real kind of spectacles, and it's all about learning the patterns and dodging around, and but they're all very like goofy-looking characters as well. All the aliens are kind of comical. It reminds me a lot of Journey to the Savage Planet art direction.
There's also something about the main character that you're playing as that looks like if you took sort of a Mega Man X boss or something and made them beefy like a 90s X-Men comic. Just like, I think this is like muscles on muscles. Like it's hard to read. It's just bulging costume. But okay, what about this? Even though this game is very much like a character action game, or I think the modern version of it would be a character action game of mostly just boss rushes. What if you use the opportunity to slow it way down, but still make it sort of sci-fi mech aesthetic, Godzilla kaiju aesthetic, and you make it feel a lot more like a Bloodborne?
You could do a Final Fantasy VII remake type of thing where you have this kind of fast-paced, realistic combat, and then you can kind of pause time or slow time way down to enter more specific types of spells or change weapons. Something that can really kind of inject that tacticality into it all.
Yeah, and then you could also add in some light RPG stuff for good measure so that you can actually progress the character. And it looks like there's even like cool things with gravity where the character's able to walk on ceilings and stuff eventually. So cool stuff all around.
All right, that brings us to the end of the ones the community sent in, with only Mike's final request to kind of lead us out of the episode. I guess let's count this as our miniature pitch for the day. Before we get into that, we should say thank you everyone for listening, and thank you for subscribing, for sending in all of your video game ideas. If you have a video game idea, big or small, you can email them to playwrightcast@gmail.com. You can go to our website, playwrightcast.com/pitch, or you can tweet us at playwrightcast. We will read and discuss your ideas for a video game of any kind, whether it's a sequel or a completely original concept, in a future show.
Yeah, and as an aside, I mean, we look at the stats and stuff week in and week out, and our group of listeners has to be some of the most consistent and loyal group of listeners that I've ever seen for a show like this. So
it's a nice way of saying that we're not growing our listeners.
No, I mean. No, I guess what I mean is, like, I'm so surprised to see, like, it is so consistent. Like, we have never, I don't know if we've ever really lost listeners. It's pretty crazy to think about. So thank you so much for being with us through 150 of these things, especially the people who have been with us through the beginning and listen to us week in and week out. And I don't know how you put up with us, but we love you and we appreciate it. Special thank you, as always, for the 150th time to PROTODOME for the use of our theme song, Hello World, off the album Blue Noise. Go check out his latest stuff. He's got a new cool, what is it called? Chiptune,
like a 1-bit
album that just came out. Yeah, he's got a demo of it on Twitter of it playing on a Game Boy, which is pretty wild.
Yeah, very cool.
And also go check out the other great shows on the Cane and Rinse Network, like Sound of Play. If you can't get enough of me, you're going to get more of me on this, either this past or this coming Sound of Play. Was this past Sound of Play?
Yeah, the one that happened yesterday, hopefully.
Okay, great. Of course, the Cane and Rinse podcast and the Sausage Factory, all great stuff.
Great. That'll take us out of the show. This is coming from Mike Esquera, who says, how would we produce a new Ace Combat game? Those are the jet fighting, Top Gun type of kind of arcadey, aerial fighters.
Didn't they call like the latest Ace Combat like the Dark Souls of flight games?
I didn't see that, but I'm sure
that?
somebody did.
Okay. Yeah, it's almost
I'd
a
love
guarantee.
if somebody went really Titanfall 2 with this and incorporated some of those like crazy mind bending, whether the world is kind of shifting around you as you're trying to navigate and fly through it and dogfight, or you have the ability to kind of like flash between two different time periods, going back and forth to try to get yourself out of trouble without trying to, crash into trees or dinosaurs or something that pop up in this alternate timeline.
I like the idea too of leveraging the tech that the No Man's Sky team has figured out, of just being able to have a persistent open world where you can land the plane, take on new missions, take right off again, and get into these generated missions potentially.
Or maybe exiting the atmosphere and continuing these dogfights out in space. I don't know how that would significantly change things.
Yeah, you see like your shield activate.
Different types of weapons are needed.
Yeah, that would be cool, because then you could go to different planets too.
Anyways, I think that'll do it for us today. This has been a long recording. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you for the next however many.
150. Oh my God, we're going to be old man gamers before we know it. Goodbye, everybody.